Okay. Good evening, everybody. Welcome to tonight's Planning Control meeting. Before we start, can I just ask you to either switch your mobiles off or put them on silent, please? Okay, moving on to the agenda. Do we have apologies? Councillor Kerr.
I'm giving my apologies for the second half of the meeting because I will need to leave before I expect it to have ended.
Okay. Anybody else? No? Okay. Late items to be introduced by the chair. That's me. No, I haven't got any. Declarations of interest, anybody? Councillor Potter.
Thank you, Chair. Just to note that I was approached by the objectors of application number 1 after the last meeting, and I pointed them into the direction of their local councillor. I'll approach this with an open mind, this application. Thank
Jolly
you.
decent of you, Judge. I mean, pointing them in that direction, you're a gentleman. Councillor Kerr again.
I just want to remind people that my father lives not far from the application site for Middleton Avenue. He has not discussed the issue with me. He's not expressed any concerns, and I have got an open mind as well.
Thank you, Councillor Kerr. I believe you said that at the last meeting as well, so presumably nothing has changed. Okay. Item 4, minutes of the meeting held on the 20th of January 22. Anybody want to move that? Seconded, thank you. Item 5, confirmation of the tree preservation order, 602. Ian?
Nothing to add to that report, thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Development Control Performance Quarter, 3rd of October to December 21, Ian?
Thank you, Chair.
Yes, Councillor Kerr.
Just 2 points. One, I think in terms of the TPO, we probably ought to acknowledge that we're not just hearing a report, but we're actually going to make a decision on that one. I would agree with the officers that we should have some control over the way in which the tree is pruned, which is what I see a TPO as giving us. That it means that it shouldn't be hacked at up to a boundary point, which is what the current law says without that control. It doesn't mean that the owner is not able to negotiate for some pruning of that tree if tree officers think it's appropriate.
I think the officers will have taken notice of that, and the arboricultural officer should be present as well. Ian, is that right?
Yeah, our arborist has taken obviously site inspection and scored the tree in line with the matrix for the scoring of TPOs and is satisfied that it meets the tests for an order, and it's just, yes, as Councillor Kerr highlights, just need your agreement to its confirmation.
Is that satisfactory, Councillor Kerr?
Yeah, sorry, Chair. I think Councillor Kerr is right that sort of confirmation is required from the committee as a whole, just to make sure that everybody is happy with the recommendation.
Okay, all those in favour of the recommendation then? That's carried. Thank you with that amendment.
Yes, thank you, Chair. It's one of our quarterly reports. Nothing to add to the substance of that. I'll take any questions, of course, but since November we've had an enforcement officer in post, which is great because we were without an enforcement officer from the middle of last year. So Sarah's now in post. She's doing sterling work, getting across the city and looking at various breaches of planning control and dealing with them. So you'll no doubt be in contact with her. I know Councillor Kerr and others have been in touch with her. So very pleased to welcome her to the team and to the council, and she's sat directly behind me.
Thank you. I'm sure all of us welcome her. She'll get used to us. Sorry, can I... Yes, Councillor Kerr.
Yeah, and that was the subject that I was going to ask Mr. Woodhead about, in that I think it would be interesting to know a little bit more about what enforcement action is now taking place, that we've got that additional resource to be able to do something. And there didn't seem to be a significant note in this report on that, and it may be that there will be more activity to report in another 3 months' time.
Yes, Ian.
Yes, Chair. We used to, if you recall, we used to do an enforcement update as well. What I'll do is I'll discuss with Sarah the best way of reporting that information, because clearly there is not only to report the breaches, but when we tackle unauthorised works and we're seeking retrospective applications, there's of course fees generated. So there's also that side to possibly chart as well, to show that enforcement does bring income into the council as well, in addition to sorting out and regularising unauthorised work. So I'll have a conversation with Sarah and duly note what Councillor Kerr said, that we do monitor and report what we do in our enforcement function.
Thank you, Ian. I'm sure the extra cash is welcome. Moving on to item 7 then, applications to be considered tonight. The first one is on pages 1 to 12, land between 42 and 46 Middleton Avenue. And to tell us about this is Ian.
Many thanks, Chair. Just in terms of housekeeping updates for members, you were circulated photographs yesterday, which you will have all seen. Members will recall that this item was reported to the last meeting and subsequently deferred. A reference to that deferral is addressed in part 7.6 of the report. Since that deferral, the case officer has visited neighbouring properties on Heath Avenue to assess the issue of perceived overlooking from the eastern face of the building. And given the potential to improve boundary treatment on that particular boundary and to address all site boundaries, the following updated condition is recommended. And it's worded as follows, it's specifically, notwithstanding the submitted boundary treatment details, prior to the occupation of the dwelling, further plans shall be submitted to and approved by the local planning authority, which accurately demonstrate the proposed boundary treatment of the site to prevent any potential overlooking and loss of privacy. The further plan shall indicate fence heights and ground levels. And I'm satisfied that this will fully address the concerns of neighbours relating to the perceived overlooking from this single-storey dwelling. The landscaping condition is drafted as condition number 5 in your report, and the wording that I've just mentioned can form the detailed wording, because as you know we abbreviate conditions in reports, so we're not tied to a specific wording. With this included, Chair, I strongly promote the recommendation, particularly as since the last meeting the tilted balance policy position is now engaged. And given that additional policy support for this residential proposal and the fact that there are no adverse impacts that would significantly and demonstrably outweigh this scheme, permission should now, in my opinion and judgment, be granted without any further delay. And I will invite the speakers, Chair. Many thanks.
Thank you, Ian. We have 3 speakers on this. Miss Donoghue.
Mrs. Bennett is going to speak first, and then me.
Okay.
When I requested to speak at this meeting, I also asked why the wrong plans were up at the meeting held on the 20th of January and why we hadn't heard anything from the planning office regarding liaising with the neighbours. And also, none of the photos we supplied were shown at the meeting. It came back that it was maladministration and as such, no decision could be made. After chasing the planning office, Stephen Bate came round Thursday the 10th and took some photos from our property and also our neighbour's property. Our big concerns are we have the loss of privacy and we are being overlooked by the large windows. it was pointed out that while standing in the bungalow, you probably wouldn't be able to see into our garden or be able to see into our bedrooms. But this is incorrect, as the builders were working on the bungalow last weekend and they could obviously see into our gardens and worse still into our bedroom windows and into my neighbour's kitchen diner. The bungalow has been built too close to the boundary, the windows are too large and too high, all pointed out by Paul Clark on his visit to site on the 24th of September, and the builder was informed of this finding. But the build carried on regardless until the trusses and the roof were installed. The building is the correct size, so we have been informed, but the fence at the rear of 42 Middleton Avenue, which was erected last year, has been built further to the east than it should have been. The bungalow has been built nearly a metre further towards our boundary than it should have been, resulting in our properties in Heath Avenue being seriously overlooked and having loss of privacy.
Thank you, Mrs. Bennett. Miss Donoghue.
As already stated, the last meeting showed plans with a garage, and these plans were several years old. I believe the garage was refused in 2007. Also, Nigel Scollin made a fundamental error by not sending our photographs to you. These photographs included ones showing how the eucalyptus tree was compromised so it could be felled as approved by Paul Clark. Where are the replacement trees? There is a moratorium on this. Also, the builder has continued to work on the bungalow, and we know that because we live there. Further, do we have accurate measurements taken of the property by an expert? Also, what about the 10-foot fencing, which has no planning permission, and the falsely elevated garden levels? I confirm that the council have not contacted local residents directly on these issues as promised. We have contacted the private building regulations firms Approved Building Control on Duffield Road, Derby, who weren't aware that the trusses had been altered. So far, this firm have allowed a cannibalised roof to be installed and faulty footings, along with significant breaches of building regulations and planning rules. Ian Woodhead's loose idea is that the faulty property has been erected anyway, so the implication is that the council might as well just pass it. This changed and flawed building has caused a significant loss of residential amenity with its plethora of incorrect windows and patio doors. These overlook directly into neighbours' gardens, and this is detrimental to the neighbours' enjoyment of their domestic curtilage. The over-intensive development of this garden area has created a building that is highly cramped within the plot. It has limited external space and is extremely intrusive to the immediate residential area. This land has become a negative mass of buildings and vehicles, which is causing harm to the character and appearance of the scenescape. In view of these factors, this significantly changed and altered new build does not offer an acceptable level of privacy and amenity, which is contrary to the requirements of saved policies CP4, GD5 and H13 of the City of Derby Local Plan Review and the overarching guidance in the National Planning Policy Framework. Therefore, I would urge you not to approve this deeply flawed retrospective application.
Thank you, Ms. Donoghue. I can assure you that Ian Woodhead would not take such a casual approach to this, or nor would he take, that view that is erected, so it's okay. He's one of our most experienced and respected officers. Councillor Lonsdale.
Thank you. residents contacted me about this on Sunday and expressed the concerns that they've already expressed about the windows overlooking them, their loss of privacy, and the worries over the builders having continued working despite the council saying stop until the adjusted plans had been approved. The concerns over the roof structure were also raised, and I was also concerned. I would like to have reassurance that this has been checked and that they do meet this standard of building regulations that we require. Yes, I'm also concerned that the wrong plans were put up for the consideration of this meeting, and that the photographs that the residents kindly took to back up their arguments weren't circulated amongst the councillors before. So I'd like reassurances that that won't happen again for future meetings. Obviously, mistakes happen. Yeah.
Thank you, Councillor Lonsdale. I believe this is your first time here. It'll get easier when you come round again. Ian, as one of our most senior and respected officers, would you care to answer some of them questions?
Thank you, Chair. Yes. In terms of the preparation for this report, clearly the details have been checked again in terms of the dimensions of the building. We've spoken to the agent and we've discussed with him the detail of the boundary treatment, which was discharged as part of the landscaping scheme, but we are, with the new condition, looking at making sure that all boundaries are properly dealt with in terms of fencing and protective measures to ensure that there isn't any overlooking from the dwelling. Clearly, there may be some overlooking. There'll be issues relating to just general disturbance associated with a new dwelling in that position. But is it uncommon, Chair, or unreasonable? If you look at the development directly to the north, the properties that were part of an infill scheme built in the mid-2000s, they're on plots of a commensurate size. The building we are talking about is single storey only, it's not two-storey. In all suburban and residential settings, you get some degree of overlooking. That's inevitable, particularly from two-storey and larger properties. And we feel that the overall layout of the plot, the fact that we can control the boundary treatment on all boundaries, and the fact that I will instruct the case officer to liaise with the agent and any residents who want to be involved with that discharge of condition to ensure that it's to the satisfaction of everybody. So that would be my suggestion, Chair. In terms of the concerns about building control and the overall competency of the work, we could include an informative note on the planning permission. We can't include conditions or anything like that because that would be overstretching the mark and that would be ultra vires. So an informative note could be included on the notice to advise the developer to ensure that building regulations approval are in place and properly sorted out. In terms of the circulation of photographs before the last meeting, there was an unfortunate error on our part there. I won't blame anybody in particular. It was nobody's fault. But in preparation for this meeting, you've had the report in line with the publishing requirements 5 full working days in advance. You've had the photographs circulated, and I've updated the meeting with the additional or the detailed wording of the condition and our commitment to work and ensure that that's properly discharged. So I think we've got all the safeguards in place, Chair, and I'm happy to take any further questions on that. Thank you.
Thank you, Ian. Members of the committee. Councillor Potter, then Councillor Kerr.
Thanks, Chair. Whilst I welcome the conditions at 8.3, Could I ask the officers how long these will be enforced for and what the enforcement will happen if the conditions are breached? Thank you.
Ian?
Yes, we'll deal with the conditions. I mean, conditions are preoccupation and management conditions, so the person behind me will is imposed to deal with breaches if they do occur. But clearly the developer knows that that people are watching the site, and so it's in his very best interest to ensure that all works are completed accordingly, and he has engaged a planning consultant to work on his behalf, so it's his job to ensure that conditions are properly discharged as required, and that's something we will obviously monitor. Thank you, Ian.
Lucy?
Can I thank the officers for hopefully now taking seriously more seriously the concerns of local people about the communications, because although I know that planning officers are very stretched at the moment, sometimes acting sooner can actually reduce the burden of communications, because people feel they're being listened to. And I think in this case, this is a good example where if there had been potentially more robust action taken sooner, it would not have been such a drawn-out process. I'm hopeful that the comments about the boundaries are going to be able to come up with a suitable solution. I think there's a difference between when we're looking at the distance between buildings and acceptability when they are two-storey and when they are bungalows, just because downstairs rooms in bungalows are so often bedrooms, whereas normally that is a first floor room in a two-storey building. And I think that does maybe as committee members we need to think about that. It may be something that we need to address and think about in the when we consider our local plan as well. But I appreciate the assurance that there's going to be closer working with local residents, and let's hope that is sufficient to solve the problems. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Kerr. Anybody else? Yes, Councillor Prosser.
So I saw the pictures. I don't know about anybody else. I was really shocked when I saw the pictures because the windows of the bungalow did appear to dominate dramatically. I was so shocked I jumped in my car and I went and had a look. And what surprised me when I saw the building was the windows are massive. The building is so big that it would put some of the windows on this building to shame. You could nearly drive a bus in through the patio doors. What's actually going on, or appears to go on, is that the bungalow has a very high ceiling height compared with normal. And therefore, although it appears to dominate, if you're standing in that bungalow, I don't believe you would have any greater view over the neighbours as most normal developments. But it does look, I mean, not in those pictures, but in the other pictures that were emailed to us, it does appear to dominate quite dramatically. But I think it's mostly a trick on the eye. So I was then, less concerned when I actually saw on site that actually it was a trick of the eye and scale because of the ceiling height. So that was just, I wanted to put that in because some of the pictures were absolutely frightening.
Jolly decent of you to inform us you've been there. Anybody else? Councillor Potter again.
Thanks, Chair. Just to clarify with Ian, these conditions at 8.3, how long will they actually be enforced for, Ian?
Well, they'll need to be discharged. Landscape and condition will have a 5-year lifespan for plants to be replaced that are dead or diseased, and then there are the boundary treatment conditions can be in place for the life of the development, Councillor Potter, if you want it to be so worded, so that there is some form of treatment in place for the life of that scheme.
Thanks, Ian. Appreciate that.
Okay. Anybody else? Okay. So, with the informative notes and the addition of the enforcement, can we move to the vote? All those in favour of the recommendation?
Stephen, are you getting 6 there? If we could have a show of hands again, please. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Yeah, I've got 6, Stephen. Yep.
Anybody against? Oh, that's carried. Thank you. Moving on to item 6, which is pages 13 to 23 in your reports, 947 London Road. And I think this is, yes.
Thank you, Chair. Just a few points of housekeeping to start off with. At 7.8 of your report, there's an incorrect reference to the house being proposed for a 5-bed house in multiple occupation. It should read a 4-bed house in multiple occupation. And also to update, we are now in receipt of final comments from our housing standards team, who overall offer no objection to the proposal, but have recommended that we confirm we're happy with the natural light being provided to each of the bedrooms. I can confirm we have looked at that obviously in detail as we've assessed the proposal, and we are happy that it's compliant with policy. Colleagues in housing have also raised the point of the need to protect the fire escape route from bedroom 4, which is located within the roof space, and to ensure adequate fire safety precautions are incorporated. We can add an informative note to this point, but it is a building regulations matter rather than a planning matter. Now just turning to the main report. This full planning application relates to number 947 London Road, which is a substantially extended semi-detached property. The property benefits from an existing hard standing to the front, which would accommodate up to 3 vehicles, and private garden space to the rear with ancillary store. Properties around the application site are predominantly in residential use, with the exception of the waste management treatment company at the back, and a service yard that's located to and access down the side of this property. Properties surrounding the amendments have been sought during the life of the application, and the application now seeks to convert this large semi-detached dwelling house into 2 flats at the ground floor and a 4-bedroomed house in multiple occupation across the first floor and within the roof space. The sizes of the flats and rooms are considered to be acceptable, and an acceptable living environment is proposed for the future residents. No objections have been sustained from colleagues in land drainage or within highways, and highways have confirmed that the provision of 3 car parking spaces along with the cycle parking is adequate for this scale of development. The application has not attracted any letters of objection from neighbouring properties, and in considering this application, members are respectively reminded of the tilted balance that must be applied when considering applications for residential development, as set out in section 6.2 of your report. The application is considered to satisfy national and local planning policy in the creation of an acceptable living environment with the provision of suitable off-street car parking, and as such, there is a presumption in favour of granting this proposal. The Office's recommendation is to grant planning permission, subject to the conditions set out on pages 21 and 22 of your report, and the application has been brought to committee by the request of Councillor Graves Senior, who's here to address you tonight. Thank you.
Thank you. I believe we have one speaker, Councillor Graves.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and members of the Planning Committee. HMOs are becoming a scourge in certain parts of the city. Alverston, for instance, has far too many now, with several more in the pipeline. As you appreciate, planning permission is only permitted when it involves more than 6 rooms, 6 individuals with a potential of 6 vehicles. This application is for 7, with only 3 parking spaces are made available on the front. Members of the committee, the builder-developer deliberately prevented the opportunity to provide more parking spaces. This was originally a 3-bedroomed house, although I accept the fact it says 4-bedroomed, semi-detached house with a vehicular access to the rear from the left-hand side of the house. Had that remained, the developer could have provided adequate parking for up to 10 vehicles. The design they went for has reduced this to 3. This area of London Road does not have suitable space for the overflow of parking that is clearly going to happen. Moreover, the council are allowing the slow deterioration of forever home communities. To allow continued licensing in concentrated areas is anti-family and anti-community. I read with interest, Mr. Chairman, that you have been reported in the Derby Telegraph as feeling very sorry for people that live near these properties. That is incredible when you have supported such applications in Alverston. As the chairman of this committee, Mr. Khan, Councillor Khan, you could persuade the council to adopt Article 4 directions where HMO numbers could be limited by the council. All I have met from the planning department is resistance to this. I think that rather than feeling sorry for local residents in these areas, you should take your role as chairman of the planning committee more seriously and take action. I, for one, would support any policy to restrict the exponential growth of HMOs. Derby needs better direction than tired platitudes. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Councillor Graves. I don't think I need your advice on how to chair planning and control meetings. I've been here long enough. But as regards the article attributed to me in the Evening Telegraph, Councillor Potter was quoted and so was I. I am totally against developments of HMOs where they're not suitable, i.e. side streets, terraced houses, etc. So I would urge you to keep your comments like that to yourself. As I said, you are a long-standing councillor, so am I. We don't need to delve into personal attacks on each other. Would you like to come back on any of that?
Thank you. No, just to point out with regards to the car parking, colleagues in highways have assessed it in accordance with the guidance and analysis within the residential car parking research, and that determines that the provision of 2 to 3 car parking spaces for up to 8 bedrooms would be adequate, so we consider that this is sufficient.
Members of the committee? Councillor Kerr and then Councillor Potter. It's reverse order.
Thank you. One of the things about car parking is it isn't only the people who live there who drive cars, it's also people who visit who drive cars. And therefore, I think that we ought to be bearing that in mind as well. And as people will not be surprised to know that I think that some journeys of visitors can actually be carried out not by car, but by bicycle, as long as people feel that they're going to arrive somewhere where they can safely lock up their bicycles. So I think incidental car parking that is suitable to be used by visitors ought to be included in premises like this, and I think that should be part of the conditions. The other thing I'm concerned about is the comments about highways land drainage, which in our report concludes by saying, as such, this is the bottom of paragraph 5.2, says, as such, we would object to the development in its current form at this time. Now, I know the planning officers have come back and said we can deal with this issue as part of a condition, but I just would like to know a bit more about what it is that land drainage is really concerned about in this situation.
So in terms of their full comments are in section 5.2 of their report. And it is obviously with land drainage matters, we normally would deal with it by way of a pre-commencement condition or a pre-occupation condition in respect of this being an already built property. Obviously the building itself will already have a drainage scheme in place. So we'll obviously deal with it by way of discharge of that condition.
Chair, I don't really understand what this is a house that's going to be lived in by people. It was previously a house lived in by people, so why have they got a concern about land drainage? We don't usually get them turning things down at this point in this situation. So what aspect of the drainage are they concerned about? Is the extension built on top of a sewer or something like that?
No, it's the extent. So the previous application for the substantial extensions is what they've got concerns about over how the drainage strategy was implemented as part of that scheme. So it's not to do with this proposal itself. It's to do with the existing drainage strategy that the extension includes.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Potter.
Thank you, Chair. Just to mention that I feel we were both mentioned in the Derby Telegraph, and I think we spoke in the best interests of Derby residents. We've all got our own opinions of HMOs, and I think it's part and parcel of today's society that bring about HMOs. We've got to look at this problem, but it's going to take far more than one planning committee to resolve this issue. Thanks, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Potter. I do agree with you that we all have our views on this and that we need to look at this seriously. I've no doubts that it affects people's lives, especially where it's not suitable in terms of terraced houses being converted from 2 bedrooms into 4, 5 and 6. So yes, obviously it was an open meeting, so you know, people have the right to quote us in what we say, and the press, media, whatever, have put our comments for the general public to see, and I don't have any problem with that. Anybody else? Councillor Prosser.
So, over the last 3 years, I've seen this house double in size. So it was a moderate house. It's now been replaced with a very substantial house. And at first glance, it looks very tidy. But I've seen that construction being built, and I wasn't particularly impressed. So when today I actually looked through the previous planning application, I saw that it was meant to be built of 100mm faced brick to match the existing. The roof was meant to match the existing, and in the application there was no mention of a loft conversion. So as we see it now, the whole side and probably the rear has been constructed in concrete blockwork which hasn't been finished and therefore is probably not appropriately waterproof, and the building does not appear ready for such conversion into a HMO, as it's not even finished or up to standard from the previous application to extend it. Of course, they did have the choice when they extended it to provide extra parking. There's a massive site there. They could have had parking around the rear or anything. Instead, they've gone for maximum property size and limited the whole area. So it's not as specified in its previous application, and that doesn't fill me with confidence. It also has a loft conversion that wasn't in the previous application. All of this speaks badly to me. So when I look at this application that was originally for 3 flats and 5 bedrooms, now reduced to 2 flats and 4 bedrooms, it might hold maybe 9 people, right? Now, if it holds 9 people, anything could happen. I mean, it might hold more, right? But according to this application, it's going to hold 9, right? We don't really know. With the 3 parking spaces, I rented a 1-bedroom flat not too long ago, actually, and I moved in with a car and a long wheelbase van. The HMO that's just opened in Hollis Street, that's opened up, and the first tenant in had 3 cars of his own. There were 6 tenants in that property, and that's in Hollis Street, where there's no parking. So to say that a house that could hold 9 people can have 2 or 3 parking spaces, and that's acceptable, to me, on a major road like that, where already you can see in that picture, everybody's already parked on the pavement. So to say that it's acceptable to have a 9-person property with only 2 or 3 parking spaces it just doesn't work, and we really are overdeveloping the site and causing ourselves problems. And even though it's on a main road, well, that might be even worse, because if you put cars down there, we're going to really cause a jam in the city. London Road is such a busy road. So to me, it's overdevelopment and a real issue with the parking and the way it's been done and the quality of the work. As has already been said, the safety implications of flats downstairs and a HMO upstairs, normally with a large HMO, you have very onerous safety conditions, fire systems, etc. put in. I don't know what building control are going to do with this. Obviously, there'll be proper fire separation, have to go in for the flats downstairs. It's quite an onerous job, but this is a way of reducing those specifications, as it were, by splitting it into flats and a smaller HMO. It comes under different legislation, so it'll be interesting to see what happens on there with the building control. So that's my thoughts on it. I think these things are quite important, because I think it would be substandard for the area. It's already a substandard building because it's not even finished, and the parking's just not enough. Okay.
Thank you, Councillor Prosser. Obviously, a lot of what you said is to building regulation and not just planning, but would you like to come back on anything on that, Laura?
Yep, I can do. So in terms of obviously the extension, they're obviously still under construction. In terms of the dormer, then that would be a permitted development extension under the rights of it being obviously a dwelling house. So there wouldn't be any reason for us to take enforcement action. We can look at obviously the conditions of the previous application and obviously make sure they are adhering to those, and obviously take enforcement action should that be necessary. And in terms of the car parking, there is a highways officer here if they want to provide any further information, but our position would be that this scale of dwelling is acceptable to have those 3 car parking spaces. In terms of obviously providing incidental visitor car parking space and ensuring that that is available at all times, then you would be reducing it to then 2 spaces for the dwelling house, so for the users. So it It's obviously just balancing that, whether you'd want one incidental car parking space and 2 spaces or 3 usable spaces at all times.
Thank you. Did Highways want to add anything to it?
Thank you, Chair. I'd just like to say that there are no policies on number of spaces with housings or dwellings of this type. And really, I think the way that we have to look at it is the intensification above what could be allowed as effectively a 6-bedroom or 6-room HMO. So in effect, the 2 additional rooms there. And I mean, just to go back to the report and quote here, it says paragraph 109 of the National Planning Framework Policy states that development should only be prevented or refused on the highways grounds if there would be an unacceptable impact on highway safety, or the residual cumulative impact on the road network would be severe. To be clear, severe does not relate to parking, but the consequences of congestion as a result of the traffic effects arising from the development. Whilst the scheme would potentially increase demand for parking spaces, in theory, those could be accommodated within the curtilage, and it's the view of the Highway Authority that it would not be possible to argue that the scheme would lead to unacceptable impacts on the highway safety. And the reason it says that is that, you know, we obviously have to look at reports which have come out of government in terms of residential parking schemes to ascertain what that demand might be. And that report, which has been based on research of 1-room non-owner occupied flats, suggests that actually the average car ownership is around 0.3 vehicles. As such, an 8-bedroom property, this would equate to 2 to 3 vehicles. Now, I understand that parking is something which is obviously on a lot of people's minds, and it causes a lot of frustration, but you know, I don't think there are grounds here to turn that down on that basis. Thank you.
Thank you. Anybody else? Councillor Kerr.
Chair, in that paragraph 5.1, we're referring to some research from 2007, though in practice that when it was published, so it would probably have been 2006. Isn't there anything more recent than something that's more than 15 years old?
The short answer is no.
I sort of agree with you, Councillor Kerr, that this is a bit outdated. Certainly, I think the changing society nowadays is different from one year to another, let alone what was passed 15, 16 years ago. A lot of the people then possibly couldn't have 2 or 3 cars in a household, whereas now that is the sort of norm that have this. So I think it's, you know, about time that we had an updated policy and information on this, so that next time somebody asks us this, we're able to answer it properly and not say, no, we haven't got one. With that in mind, anybody else want to speak on it? Okay. Would somebody like to move it to the vote? Seconder? All those in favour of the recommendation?
I've got 2 there, Chair.
All those against? No, you can't vote, Councillor Graves.
5, Stephen.
That recommend, how many? We got 6.
So that was 2 in favour, 5 against.
Okay. That recommendation is refused, basically. So would you like to tell us what to do next, Stephen?
Well, Chair, you need to take a vote on whether to refuse the application, but I'd suggest that you probably should first of all discuss and agree grounds on which members wish to refuse it on.
Who's proposing the 3 grounds then? Seeing as 5 of you have voted against it.
Chair, I don't mind. Parking and
Councillor
highways
Holmes.
impact.
Sorry?
Parking and highways impact for a starter for 10, if you want one.
Okay. Anybody wish to add to that?
Right, Chair, on that basis, do you want to go to ask for a seconder for that and then go to the vote?
Do we have a seconder for Councillor Holmes' reasons? We have a seconder. All those in favour then of that?
I've got 3 there, Chair.
All those against? That's carried.
1 against.
1 against, that's carried.
You, just in case it goes to appeal, does a councillor want to volunteer or be seconded?
Councillor Holmes, will you be volunteering?
I'll defer it to anybody else if they wish to. I'm looking around, but I will if it goes to appeal. Would anybody want to do it instead of me? You're very generous, Councillor Prosser.
It looks like you volunteered, Councillor Holmes. Okay, moving on to item 3, which is pages 24 to 40 in your report, and that's the former Pizza Hut on the Wyvern side. Derby, to tell us about that is Ian.
Many thanks, Chair. In terms of updates for the report, members have been furnished with additional letters of support following its publication, and this includes a letter from tonight's speaker. In terms of an update to the substance of the report, the first line of the officer opinion highlights that the site is currently vacant and there would be significant benefit in bringing it back into use. However, specific reference to job creation is not included in the appraisal, and I just wanted, to be fair, to highlight that it is stated by the company that this metric could equate to between 50 and 75 jobs. Turning to the main report, Chair, members will be familiar with this site at Wyvern Side, which was previously occupied by Pizza Hut for a number of years, and it's currently vacant. The application seeks permission to specifically accommodate the operating model of Tim Hortons, and the origins, scale and scope of that brand are highlighted in the supporting evidence from the company. As your report states, the specific area of contention with the application surrounds the impact of the proposal and its associated new drive-through lane on the safe functioning of this part of the local highway network. Discussions have been hosted during the life of the application, and the position of Highways colleagues and the opposing view of the applicant's transport consultants are included in the application document, your report and the additional supplementary information. To further explain the Council's position, Andy Gibbard is on hand to provide further advice, and the concluding part of your report states, although in my opinion and judgment the application is finely balanced, Highways officers are of the opinion that the proposed development is likely to contribute to an unacceptable impact on highway safety that cannot be acceptably mitigated. Therefore, given that there are real concerns about public safety on an important and busy part of the local highway network, a recommendation to refuse permission on highway safety grounds is provided. Clearly, the benefits of bringing a vacant building back into a viable reuse and its positive commercial impact are an important consideration. However, Chair, it is felt that this is outweighed by the concerns over public highway safety. And given the negative recommendation, Chair, you have Mr. Hydes of Tim Hortons to speak to you. Many thanks.
Mr. Hydes, you have 3 minutes, same as everybody.
Thank you, Chair, and good evening, members of the committee. Thank you for the opportunity to speak to you today. My name is Kevin Hydes. I'm the Chief Commercial Officer for Tim Hortons here in the UK. Tim Hortons is a relatively new entrant to the UK market, but we are actively seeking to expand and keen to bring our popular coffee and bakery offer to Derby, where there's been an overwhelming demand for the brand on our social media channels, more so than most in the whole of the UK. As you'll be aware, we are seeking permission to reconfigure the vacant Pizza Hut unit at Wyvern Side and bring it back into economic use as a Tim Hortons coffee shop and bakery. We're also proposing an introduction of a drive-through lane, a quick and easier option for customers who do not want to use our restaurant to dine in. We have sought to work with your officers to develop a scheme that is acceptable in both planning and operational terms, and we are therefore extremely disappointed that the application is being recommended for refusal. Officers acknowledge this is a finely balanced decision and are clear that there are no reasons for refusal other than that the stated concerns regarding congestion and highway safety. It is not explicitly noted in the report, but there are also very clear benefits from the proposal, not least up to 75 new jobs created for local people and the reuse of a current vacant and highly prominent unit. Of course, granting permission would also allow Tim Hortons to bring our popular offer to the people of Derby, a first for the county. All that is stopping this is your highways authority's concerns regarding queuing at atypical times of the year. But traffic queuing in the build-up to Christmas is normal. Also, your highways officers agree that there are no highway safety concerns in the area at the moment, and the existing unit could be reoccupied at any time by a restaurant, coffee shop operator with a high proportion of takeaway sales. It is also of note that despite their concerns, your highways officers have not investigated the cause of the queuing that they have observed at peak, but we have. It is the layout of the Costco car park. There is a simple solution, and your officers have the powers under the Highways Act to sort it if they wish. There is therefore no planning or highways reason why the current application should be refused. The Tim Hortons proposal will add at most just one car in every 4 minutes to highways network at peak times. Put simply, the existence of Tim Hortons in that location will not compromise your highways network. Therefore, I urge you to go against your officer's recommendation and approve this application so that Tim Hortons can serve the people of Derby who clearly wish for us to be here. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Hyde. Good time in there. Ian, would you like to come back on that?
No, Chair. I'd hand over to Andy at this juncture. Thank you.
Members of the committee, I have Councillor Holmes first.
Thank you, Chair. Actually, that was a very well presented state of the nation, really, in terms of where we are with this particular area of Derby from the applicant. And they covered a very interesting fact that the issues on this island and the congestion, which is primarily at peak shopping times, so weekends and also seasonal peaks, is because of the layout of the Costco entrance. I know that because of my work on the revised A52 project, and there must be an engineering or highway solution to solve that issue. In fact, I'm sure there definitely will be. I think this applicant has a proposal which will bring a lot to the city, jobs, investment and a unique offer, but we as a planning committee have to consider the planning merits rather than economics and all those other things. I believe that I'm minded to support this application, but I would like officers to explore what their view is in regards to a longer term solution, not just for this application, but for the current congestion, which does happen. It is a real thing, but it is as a result of mostly people wanting to shop at Costco, and we need to solve it. I would also ask officers if their opinion, if the committee were minded to refuse this application, what their view is in regards to appeal by the applicant on the issue of the access which they believe is causing this issue, and that technically, if resolved, could pave the way for officers to, I'm sure, be more minded to recommend approval. So just on that, Chair, I might come back on a couple of things if you'd allow me to, but I'd like to hear officers' view on the things that I've asked and also the things that I've said in terms of my view of what the state is of this this application proposal.
Thank you, Councillor Holmes. Ian?
I'll just invite Andy to comment, Andy Gibbard, because he's invested a lot of time in this application and looking at the issues, and clearly it is, you'll be all familiar with the new junction and the amount of traffic that gets through there. So I'll defer to Andy.
Your expertise is needed, Andrew.
Holmes said, he mentioned about jobs and economic benefits are not planning matters. They can be taken into account. So just to clarify that point.
Thank you, Chair. I'll come back directly to that question on, doing something with the Costco car park. I think what we need to understand is that solution sits outside of this plan application. It's on third-party land. There may be a solution for it, but I think that remains to be seen whether that will actually solve the current problems that are going on there. Now, I think that what's been mentioned is that we have powers as Highway Authority under Section 16 of the Traffic Management Act, but I think we have to be really careful here about using that. We don't have the power of direction. That means to say that we can't go onto third-party land, we can't directly make Costco implement an improvement scheme. I think it possibly we could do that under some form of legal action, but I think my understanding is that is very untested, and therefore, whether we could achieve a scheme there or make Costco do something there, I think remains to be seen.
Thank you, Andrew. Councillor Carr.
Thank you, Chair. I think most of what I would have liked to have said has been said by the Speaker for the applicant and Councillor Holmes. I think it is finely balanced, but in my view, we ought to be able to solve those problems. I think this is an excellent use of sorry? Oh, sorry. I think this is an excellent use of an abandoned building at the moment, and I'll be voting in favour of this application. I could just make one point though. On the site access, I don't know if that drawing there, if you see at the top where the two red lines are and the site comes in, that footway is shown as curbed. Now people will want to go across there to get to the other places further down. So I think that footway should not be curbed. It should be an uncurbed crossing in accordance with what the recent changes to the highway code, where pedestrians should take priority where something is coming in from off a road. So that's my only comment in terms of technically the detail of the actual application.
Thank you, Councillor Carr. Councillor Jennings.
Thanks, Chair. I just want to make a personal point on one of the things that's included in the report, where it says it's not clear why queues only started to appear in November 2021, and it's a problem of our own making. It's basically when Costco started to sell petrol, and that is when the queues started.
Thank you, Councillor Jennings. Councillor Prosser.
Well, it's interesting. I haven't picked up on that, but we've all seen the Costco Christmas crisis. I've been lucky enough to avoid it as much as possible, so that's been all right for me. But I think it's really important we get this building back in function. It's been there for quite a long time now, and I don't see that Tim Hortons here will make much of a difference to any other restaurant that would open on that site. If we had a highways problem, then surely Marks and Spencer's opening right next door is a much bigger problem. And this restaurant's been here for a long time, and we should just get it back up and open. And I can't see the traffic being anything other than negligibly different to what it would have been had it remained a Pizza Hut. So I will be supporting the applicant.
Thank you, Councillor Prosser. I think you're missing the point, or some of us maybe, that it's the drive-through issue that we're worried about. Councillor Nawaz.
Thank you, Chair. exactly what Councillor Foster said. You know, the Marks and Spencers, I don't know if you remember, some of we were on the committee when we refused it a couple of times because of it, and now they're back opening soon, the Marks and Spencers, because of the congestion. That's why we refused it. I don't want this application to go back and then 2 months later, 3 months later, we pass it. You know, we'd rather pass it tonight, you know, support it. I've totally supported it because it's abandoned building. We need to, it's not going to get any worse with the traffic, what it was before. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Anybody else? Councillor Prosser, you're coming back for seconds tonight.
Just on the point of it, the takeaway, the drive-through area, Pizza Hut used to do a takeaway. So although there will be more people driving through than perhaps took away from Pizza Hut, it was still available as an option, and I don't believe it will make any difference.
I don't disagree with you about people going, but the thing is when people buy takeaways, they actually park their car in the car park and go in. We're talking about a drive-through, which will, you know, let's not beat about the bush. This will add congestion to it. This will make queues longer. This will delay traffic on there. I welcome, you know, jobs, whether they're 15 or 50 or 75, welcome the income from that's going to be generated from there. But in the absence of us being able to do anything tonight against Costco to rearrange the car park, you know, I don't think that we can, or certainly I don't feel that is something that I could support, because in the absence of that, you know, being the case in terms of whether we go or succeed anywhere or not, rather with the, you know, legal action against Costco and ask them to reorganize their car park, until such time, I don't think I'd be doing my job properly if I said, well, yeah, I support it, because we can see, you know, quite clearly that there's going to be congestion there, there's going to be queuing there. And as I said, Councillor Prosser, the difference between people going to a restaurant and saying, I'll have a takeaway instead of sitting down, is that they're actually going to the car park. They're not queuing through there. So what this will generate, I mean, you can just imagine, you know, Derby County playing at home if we're still in the league, and, you know, see the kind of traffic this is going to generate. Costco's has been there a long while. Yes, I agree with some of the comments made by Councillor Jennings and even Councillor Holmes that this is probably something that we didn't look at when we gave permission for that, you know, when it was built. But at the moment, what we have to look at is the fact that this is going to generate queues simply because of the drive-through. If they didn't come with the drive-through, I don't think any one of us would have been wanting to deliberate on it. Would have said, yes, that's fine. Fine. Sorry, Councillor Holmes.
Thank you, Chair, for letting me come back. Just a couple of 3 points really to finish off. I think it's important to state that Costco aren't the bad guys here. You know, I know it's unrelated to this specific application. We've mentioned it in various issues.
I don't think that was suggested.
No. I'm just.
I hope that isn't suggested.
No. I'm not saying it is.
A lot longer than any newcomers.
Yeah, and the point I'm trying to make is that Costco are a very important, you know, generation of jobs for us, and a really good positive thing for the city. And it's great that they're actually really busy. It means the economy is booming in Derby and all the things that we need. But on that, I think that, thank you for the officer to clarify, of course, economic jobs, those benefits are factors, and therefore when we're talking about a balance, you know, highways impact, officers being concerned about that, recommending refusal. On the other side, the benefits, the jobs benefits, the economic benefits, it's us as committee members to actually balance those and see which way it goes. And actually that strengthens my resolve to actually support this. And I think ultimately there is a solution here to reduce congestion. I think I know what it is, but I'm sure officers can pursue that, and all those concerned within that retail space there will probably come to a conclusion that it might be a positive thing for all of them to get that solution so that all can benefit. So I see it as a win-win for me, and I'm going to be supporting this.
Thank you, Councillor Holmes. Perhaps you should have told the officers a long time ago about the solution to this problem then. Councillor Potter.
Thanks, Chair. Yes, we did. We've discussed this area several times on planning, and Costco changed the concept when they actually installed that petrol station. I think most Derby residents know not to drive around this area between 4 and 6 on most days, and especially at football match times or heavy traffic times. It has been mentioned that this establishment will add to the traffic flow by 1 car every 4 minutes. I just wonder if there's any evidence to that.
Is there any evidence, Andrew?
I think that that's where there's a disagreement between what we think it'll generate and I think the applicant, what they think will generate. As the table up here shows, so on that top line, you've basically got the increase above and beyond the Pizza Hut as it stands now, which is between 83 and 166 two-way trips. So that's in and out of the Wyvern side. But obviously the point about this application is that there is a fallback position that actually something could come in there and operate as it is. Pizza Hut didn't really generate a huge amount of trips. It was quite a low-level restaurant operation. So in total, this is where we disagree, I think, with the applicant, that we think that that's more likely to be around 46% of those trips will actually be the uplift as a result of the fast food takeaway sales or the drive-through, compared to the applicant who assumes it's 25. On top of that, they've also made assumptions that actually people going to Burger King and also KFC are going to swap and go to Tim Hortons. I mean, that's something else that we dispute, because I think they're a totally different food offer. You know, Burger King to a bakery or KFC to a bakery is a very different food type. Also that Costco and M&S, that there's also some linked trips there, that people coming from those two retail shops will stop and have a coffee in Tim Hortons as well. Again, it's reducing that number of trips into the site. Again, contest that because M&S will have a coffee shop and Costco has a coffee shop. So, you know, I suppose it's down to members to consider whether people are going to, you know, get in their cars and quickly nip to Tim Hortons from the M&S and Costco. I mean, you know, I don't think that's right. And I think when you look at planning applications and you look at transport assessment, you should always take the robust view rather than trying to fritter away the trips, which has been done and demonstrated in that table. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Andrew. Councillor Jennings.
Can I just come back on that, please, Chair? That doesn't really help me, those figures. So it needs to be displayed at least, you know, is that, you're saying so many trips increase, but over what over what period? So how many an hour?
So basically what we have up here is, so the trips between 83 and 166 are for the peak hours. So that is the AM peak, 8 and 9 o'clock, the lunchtime peak, the PM peak, which is the you know, the charge home between 5 and 6, and then the Saturday peak. So that's a spread. That's a spread of those two-way trips across those different peaks. I think ideally what should have been shown was the individual trips for each peak. But the 166 applies to the Saturday, for example. The 83 applies to the lunchtime peak, basically. So that's per hour. So that's two-way trips per hour.
Are you any the wiser, Councillor Jennings? Yes. Jolly good, because I was just dozing off there trying to get you sorted out. Anybody else? Just to come back to Councillor Potter, my mate Jed. Yeah, look, there's absolutely no, you know, sort of doubt that traffic will increase here. Now, if it was just a operator, whether it's Tim Hortons or you know, Starbucks or whatever, there'd be no problem. What we're looking at here is the congestion that's going to be caused by the drive-through, and that is the main issue. Other than that, as I said, you know, we welcome the jobs, we welcome everything, but knowing what's going to happen there, I think we ought to, you know, think very carefully about how we vote on this. Right? What you will see is the congestion there, the queues there, and there can be no doubt about that. It is, regardless of how you try to cover it up, there will be extra traffic generated simply because of the society we live in, where people, if they can, they will, drive their car right into their lounge just to, say, walk in a few yards, right? And that's what's going to happen. So with that in mind, somebody like to move it to the vote? Second.
Sorry, Chair. Sorry to interrupt again. Is there anything that we could put forward in terms of some kind of condition, in terms of exploring highways changes to alleviate the issues in this area of the roundabout or access to the various retail units, or Costco specifically, I suppose? Is there any way that we can do that?
Ian?
No, Chair, but we could include an informative note to encourage the developer, if you were so minded, to obviously look at granting a permission, to invite them to seriously look at this issue and to engage with neighbouring occupiers to look at the potential solutions at their disposal on their own land. But we couldn't force them to do anything else by condition or anything else, Stephen.
Here is as Andy said, whilst I think it's a case of members either accepting that there's this is going to cause a problem on site, and whilst it's been suggested that there might be a possible mitigation, that's unclear. There's nothing. There's no certainty that there's a possibility for mitigating that. What that would achieve. That's not being looked at. What the costs are, and whether it would work. So I think if members are accepting what Andrew is sort of saying in terms of there will be an impact, and that's in dispute. Obviously, the developers would not accept that. They sort of say that that's not correct in their view. But if members say that, as you've suggested, there will be an impact from this, at this point of time, we don't have a scheme mitigating it. So members will just simply have to accept that this development will cause problems on the network as such. And in terms of conditions, I can't really see an acceptable and appropriate condition that would deal with it. You either grant it or you don't grant it, because there's no scheme of mitigation currently being looked at or being proposed that really would work on a condition at this stage. I can't see, because there's no certainty that mitigation could be put forward.
Yeah, thank you, Stephen. I agree with you, and I'm not a great fan of granting permission and then asking, the applicant to go and talk to your neighbour and see, if you can do this, if you can do that. That is not something that we can consider today. We can't say that because they're going to have a conversation and they, both become pals and say, yeah, you can use part of my car park, or I'll configure it rather. That is not what's before us. What you have to look at is what's before us tonight, and the fact that, yes, we have highways telling us it's going to generate extra traffic. We know it's going to generate extra traffic. All of us here know the spot very well because, for one reason or another, we go past there, or we've done site visits. That is, I absolutely wouldn't say to any applicant or any application for that matter to say, well, we'll grant it, can you go and talk to your neighbour about it? That's not how we should operate as an authority. Councillor Holmes, did you want to say anything finally?
That said, Chair, I think there's still in my view, there's still some value with an informative note, if that's allowable and officers agree, to encourage solutions to the congestion that already exists, and that, accepting that there is going to be an increase in traffic, it's disputed, but each person in this committee decides whether that's acceptable or not. But I still think it would be a positive thing to have an informative note. Can that be done in an acceptable way? Can officers agree on that, or aren't we allowed to do that?
I don't really want to speak for Ian. I'm sure that he'll come in. I mean, you can put an informative note on any planning, but effectively, what you're asking is simply not within the control of the developer as such. I mean, sort of in terms of the impact on sort of the traffic if the development, obviously permission is granted. I mean, sort of he's got no control over Costco and sort of how they deal with their site, I assume. But yeah, I mean, I think I'll leave it to Ian whether he's happy with an informative note.
But, you know, I think putting an informative note is no onus on the applicant or on Costco to come to an agreement. I mean, if we grant permission, there's no, you know, sort of a way we can say to them, well, have you, you know, reached an agreement with Costco? The same way we can't go to Costco and say, well, you know, as Mr. Hyde come to you regarding trying to sort an issue out. So I fail to see what benefit that is to us as councillors and to the members of the public who will look at the decisions that we make today on the information based in front of us. You know, it's folly to me. Did you want to add something to that, Ian?
No, thank you, Chair. I just think you need to vote on it, personally. But there we go.
Anybody else want to speak on it? Councillor Carr again?
To clarify, although I said I would move the motion, the motion is to refuse permission, and I shall be voting against that, Chair. I just want to make that absolute.
Anybody else want to speak? No? Okay, then would somebody like to move it to the vote? It's quite clearly stated there to refuse planning permission, so that is the recommendation. Would anybody like to move it to the vote? Councillor Potter seconded. All those in favour of the recommendation to refuse planning permission?
I've got 2 there, Chair.
Me as well, 3, 2.
So can I see? Sorry, I've got Councillor Potter and the Chair. I can only see 2. Yep, 2.
Sorry?
I just want to see those hands, and I can only see 2 hands. I can only see 2 hands. But that, yeah.
Okay, all those in favour of the recommendation? Okay, would somebody like to move it? Councillor Potter, somebody like to second it? We can't get a seconder. I would have preferred it from the committee. Okay, move it, I'll second it.
It's fairly conclusive that there's 2 for, I think.
Councillor Jennings, you're causing too many problems tonight.
And do you want to take those against the motion then, please?
If Councillor Jennings would allow us to. All those against the recommendation then? Okay.
I've got 8 there. Have you, Stephen? 8 there, Chair.
The recommendation is refused.
And Chair, I suppose you need to just put it to the vote in relation to granting the permission, I suppose. And I suspect you'll need somebody to put that motion and to second it.
Okay, all those in favour of granting permission?
Chair, I'll propose to grant permission or propose vote on the permission.
I'll second that, Chair.
Well, sorry, Chair, I was just saying to Ian that obviously it will be Ian will have to come in with conditions, but the principle of the granting of the permission. So.
with that in addition, then somebody'd like to move it to vote.
I'll move it, Chair.
Thank you. Seconded. All those in favour then?
Chair, I've got 8 there. Do you have a say there, Stephen?
That's carried then.
Right. Can I ask, I think Ian needs to come in on the conditions, because obviously there needs to be conditions attached to the permission sort of as such.
Ian?
Yes, I think what I'll do, Chair, is I'd suggest that there would be a standard time limit condition, an approved plans condition, and also what I would suggest is that I agree those in detail with you before the permission is issued as Chair and with Councillor Kerr as Vice Chair. And also for the benefit of the minutes, I think we need to establish a summary of reasons to say why that you're moving against the recommendation to refuse permission. And I think on the balance of the discussion, it was, as I saw it, the overriding benefits of bringing this building into a viable reuse and the commercial benefits of such outweighed the negative impacts of the traffic safety issues that had been highlighted by the highways officer. And for those reasons, on balance, members decided that that was the benefit of granting planning permission.
Thank you. Councillor Holmes, would that be a fair summary of your points?
Sorry, Chair, I turned my mic off there. Absolutely, that's spot on.
Jolly good. I wasn't going to ask Councillor Jennings in case he brought something new to the table.
Yeah, that's it. Thank you, Chair.
Moving on to the next item then, which is potential future site visits.
Yes, thank you, Chair. On to the glamour item. Just the one to report. It's actually a variation of condition. It's the care home at Ricknold Road that you've looked at before. They want to put photovoltaics on the 4 roof planes of the building. Not a lot to see there, really, Chair. Thank you.
Anybody wants to have ladder will travel? No? In that case then, thank you very much for attending. Good night.